I've seen Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse twice now, and will probably be doing so again very soon. After rewatching Into the Spider-Verse before seeing its sequel, both of these films have kind of been living rent-free in my head for many days, and it's going to be that way a little while longer since I'm currently working on another video that happens to revolve around Spider-Man. So I'm pretty much in Spider-Man mode right now. The first Spider-Verse is featured heavily in that upcoming video, but I wanted to go ahead and make a more laid-back, less heavily edited video specifically dedicated to not just Into the Spider-Verse, but also to Across the Spider-Verse, because I think both of these films are worthy of it. This isn't going to be a deep dive or analysis of either of these movies, it's more going to be me just nerding out over them and getting my thoughts out, because that's what my channel is. It's an outlet for my insane ramblings. I'm going to have timestamps in the description if you want to skip around. For Into the Spider-Verse, there will be spoilers throughout, so warning if you somehow haven't seen that yet. There will be a spoiler section for Across the Spider-Verse, so if you haven't seen that, don't worry, I'll avoid spoilers for the first section of that. So, I remember back when the teaser trailer for Into the Spider-Verse came out in 2018, which, by the way, is crazy because it just doesn't feel like it's been that long. I was immediately struck by the strong visuals. Stylistically, it really didn't feel like any of the other mainstream animated releases that were coming out at that time. And I do want to stress mainstream when I say that, because there are always inventive, beautiful animated films that come out every year all over the world that just don't get the attention that they deserve. The older I get, the more I find that I'm wanting more art that stands out from what I'm shown in the mainstream, and I think back in 2018 a lot of people were doing the same. They were yearning for something that was so radically different from the typical look and feel that we were getting at that time. Each of the major studios had their own specific aesthetic that they had been developing since their beginnings. As an audience, I think we all got used to and could even identify the visual styles of studios like Pixar, DreamWorks, or Disney. So when Sony dropped Into the Spider-Verse, it stood out and did so in a way that respected both 3D animation as well as traditional 2D animation and showed a clear reverence for the medium of comics as well. Like, you could pause this film at any point and you would have an amazingly drawn comic book panel that has the depth of 3D as well as the sort of drawn look of 2D. And the shots are all staged in a way that feels like comic book panels come to life. At points, they even have text bubbles pop up and onomatopoeias that appear in action sequences. There are so many strong visuals that they boarded so well for this movie that some have now become iconic in such a short amount of time. Miles jumping from that building in that beautiful sequence is an image that just pops into my mind now when I think of this movie. It's such a vibrant film. The colors are so explosive and they aren't afraid to get kinda surreal with it and change the color palette to fit the emotions of the specific sequence. The emotions of the characters enhance the visuals. If this was purely a visual experience, it would definitely be acclaimed for that reason alone, but it helps that this movie does have a very strong narrative with characters whose arcs are so well set up and followed through. You come for the animation and stay for these characters and this story. Miles is just such an easily likable protagonist, one that I feel both young and old can relate to and empathize with. Miles Morales sets himself apart from Peter Parker in that he knows that he has this great potential even before he has his spider powers, and actually doesn't want to stand out really. What he deals with before ever coming in contact with the spider that bites him is this change he's going through in his life, going to this new school where he's expected to excel and develop the natural intelligence that he has. Miles is special and he is afraid of the pressures that come with that, and all the people in his life know that he can do great things and try to push him to be confident in himself. This is all paralleled whenever he meets the other spider people. They also try to push him to live up to the potential that they know he has. Miles does grow that confidence in himself and learns to accept who he has become, but also reminds the other characters that everybody has their own unique way of doing things and becoming the best version of themselves. Just because they're all similar doesn't mean that they're all exactly the same. Miles becomes Spider-Man, but does so by embracing that he is going to be his own version of Spider-Man. That theme of the leap of faith that one has to take in order to realize their full potential is one that is kinda universal, and I really think that's one of the reasons that so many like myself resonated with this story. One of the biggest compliments that I can give this story is just how efficiently it gets you invested in each of these characters. We spend most of the time with Miles, but for the other characters, there are these quick montage sequences where they establish their backstories, tragedies, character traits, and motivations. I'm amazed at how effective each of these sequences are, specifically for Gwen and Peter B. Parker. They each have these little arcs set up so quickly, so effectively, that they complete by the end. Gwen has this fear of getting close to someone because she lost her version of Peter. Peter B. Parker is afraid of messing things up because this version of the character is at his lowest point. Miles learns from them, and in turn, they learn from him. In Gwen's case, not to be afraid to open up to friendship, and in Peter's case, to never give up on trying to bounce back from the hardships of life. Even the Kingpin is given his own montage/flashback sequence where we're given the reason as to why he's doing so much damage to the dimensions with the Collider. You kind of feel for him that he lost his family and is just trying to find a world where they're alive to get them back. Of course, he's wrong in that he both ignores the potential consequences that come from this and that he blames Spider-Man for what happened when it's really his criminal actions that led to his family's loss in the first place. There's this poignant moment toward the end where he sees another version of his family, and just like the family he lost, they're terrified of the monster that he looks like as he fights Spider-Man. As funny as this movie can be, it has no problem also doing some very heavy emotional things with its story. Everything they do with Miles' Uncle Aaron, who is revealed to be the Prowler, is taken so seriously. There's a real sense of danger communicated in these moments where the Prowler is after Miles, and since he's not yet fully become Spider-Man, we know that his uncle, who doesn't know he's chasing his nephew, could easily kill him, and it's very scary at times, but also ends up being so tragic when Aaron does find out that his nephew is who he's been chasing. All the wrong that he's done finally catches up to him, and his death is that ultimate tragedy that all Spider people have to go through that transforms them into the hero that they are. My favorite character relationship in the film has got to be the one between Miles and his dad. His dad actually has what is probably my favorite scene in the movie next to the leap of faith sequence. It's that moment after Aaron dies and Miles' father comes to his door and tries to talk with him, really opening up about how much greatness he sees in Miles, about why he pushes him so hard and how he doesn't want to grow apart from his son like he did with his brother and fears losing Miles. It's such a sweet moment, and it comes right before that scene where Miles becomes who he's meant to be. Like, that sequence would not be as beautiful, I think, without this scene right before. The voice acting from Brian Tyree Henry as Miles' dad here is some of the best in the movie. Actually, all of the performances in this film are very strong. Each actor really inhabits their character so well that I don't really picture the actor in the booth in my head. I just see the character, and that's one of the biggest compliments that I give to a voiceover performance. I think the second half of what makes this movie so stylistically distinct and so fun to watch is the music. Daniel Pemberton's score for this movie is one of the best I've heard in a long time. The themes and motifs that he structures for each character pair so well with the visuals and are just used at the right moments. The way that he incorporates these really cool synthesizer sounds and instrumentation that can be hopeful and uplifting but also dark and intense, like the theme for The Prowler. It's an amazing score. And the soundtrack itself is really good. The actual licensed songs that they use fit their scenes very well. I find myself listening to both the score as well as the soundtrack often while I'm working. One of the only real issues I have with this movie, and it's extremely minor, is that with characters like Spider-Ham, Spider-Man Noir, and Penny Parker, there is a much stronger, more distinct animation style and color change to show that they're not from this dimension, and I think I would have liked for Peter and Gwen to have been treated the same way. Obviously, for story purposes, they have to blend in with the world around them, but I think there could have been more subtle things done to differentiate them from characters from the dimension the film takes place in, like Miles. Again, it's a very minor thing. I still love the character designs for them, and they also actually address this in the sequel with Gwen. I can't wrap up talking about this movie without discussing the clear influence that it had on current mainstream animation. It seems like a lot of animated films right now are trying to evoke this same energy and are borrowing from this style quite a bit. I'm going to be careful and not say that any of these films are ripping off Spider-Verse because I don't think that's fair. I think they were just inspired by elements of it and want to capture that. Puss in Boots: The Last Wish played around with frame rate in its action sequences like Spider-Verse. The new Ninja Turtles movie coming out looks like it's drawing a lot of inspiration from Spider-Verse in how it's translating the Ninja Turtles from comics into animation. There's that new Disney film called Wish that a lot of people are commenting looks like it's trying to visually be like Spider-Verse. It's very obvious that this movie had a huge effect on the entire medium, and that's very important to address. I did a video a while back about animation needing to be taken much more seriously, and one of the biggest issues that I have with that video is that I didn't include Spider-Verse. It was not intentional. Like, I remember the first comment I got asking where Spider-Verse was, and it hit me that I didn't include it, and I've regretted it ever since. I even had footage of it downloaded too, which is even worse, but no video is perfect. You make mistakes, and it's important to acknowledge those. That was definitely one of my bigger blunders. I love this movie. If you somehow haven't watched it yet, do yourself that favor, please. You won't regret it, I promise. Although, if you are someone who deals with photosensitivity, I do want to warn you that this movie and its sequel do have flashing sequences that may be harmful, so just a warning for those of you who deal with that. So this is going to be the part of the video where I talk about Across the Spider-Verse. There will be no spoilers in this section. I will be as vague as possible, but I do recommend that you go in completely blind to see it. Right off the bat, the first thing that has to be discussed about this film is the animation. Somehow, they completely outdid the already breathtaking visuals from the first. I don't know how that's even possible, but there were images created on screen that I just wanted to screenshot, save, and print out to hang on my wall in my bedroom. I'm on Twitter, and some of the concept artists, animators, modelers, people who worked on this movie are on Twitter and are posting about the insane work that went into every aspect of this work of art, and I'd recommend checking out some of their posts after you see the film. And again, I've seen this movie twice now, not just because I love it so much, but because I want to support the work that went into creating this world that is vibrant, colorful, fun, fast-paced, and intricately designed. It's a movie that deserves to be seen in theaters on a big screen. I can't properly put into words just how good this movie looks. It needs to be experienced theatrically, and I urge you to do that if you haven't done so yet. One of the strongest elements of the first film was the characters. Miles, Peter, and Gwen were so easy to get invested in, and I wanted to see how their arcs played out in that first film. In the sequel, they do what all great sequels should, and expanded upon the characters established in the first. I'm going to talk a little bit about Miles' journey that he goes on in a moment, but I have to say that probably my favorite character in this movie is actually Gwen. My favorite scenes in this movie are Gwen's scenes. The way she interacts with Miles, their chemistry. It's all improved upon from what they established in that first film, but they actually show Gwen's universe more in this film. Her dimension is shown off more here, and I won't spoil too much about that, but her dimension is visually the standout that is traveled to in this film. It actually addresses an issue that I had with the first film, that I didn't think Gwen was too visually different from Miles, despite being from another dimension. In Gwen's world in the second film, there is a clear visual difference from the dimension Miles comes from. The colors, the art direction, it sets itself apart from the other dimensions that are traveled to, and it's amazing to look at. Learning more about Gwen and what she's going through just makes her character that much stronger, and the performance of Haley Steinfeld is the best one in the movie. Similar to Brian Tyree Henry in the first, she absolutely brings it in the sequel. Her line deliveries actually made me emotional at one point in the story. Just a great character, performed exceptionally. Another character that gets expanded upon in this movie is Miles' mom. Not only are the interactions between her husband and son really funny and charming, but there are beautifully written conversations that she has with Miles that help us to better get connected with this family. and that makes the journey that Miles goes on in the story that much more engaging, even more so than the first film. I actually think this is an improvement in every way over the first as a film. The story, the characters, the animation, and the score. Daniel Pemberton just went insanely hard on the score for the sequel. He reincorporated a lot of the motifs from the first, but added these new themes for new characters that just pair so well with the mood that each of them brings to any scene. Those new characters, and I'll try not to reveal too many details outside of what is in the marketing, but the main villain of the story is this character, the Spot. And I won't give away too much in regards to his story, but I will say that he is both very funny, but also legitimately threatening by the end, and his theme, kind of like the Prowler from the first film, is this dark, intense music that just fits. The best new theme, though, goes to one of the absolute best new characters, and that is Miguel O'Hara, also known as Spider-Man 2099. Again, without giving too much away, this is a person who I think is going to be kind of debated online for a while in regards to the choices that he makes in this story and how they affect the characters around him. There is this moral dilemma that he presents to Miles, and how Miles responds to that is what I think makes this journey so much more compelling and adds on to the themes established in the original film. A lot of this story is Miles struggling against what is deemed meant to happen by other characters and this world that the story takes place in. For any Berserk fans out there like myself, you'll probably be fans of this story of fighting back against fate. Miles choosing to do things his own way, in spite of the potential consequences, is what makes him so endearing as a protagonist to watch. The choices he makes are those that originate from how he is characterized in the first film. Any great sequel should do what this sequel does. It grows its characters by putting them up against new challenges and having them question things that they think they know about themselves. Said challenges are faced in some just amazingly done action sequences. There are a ton of characters in this movie, a lot of them with spider powers, and watching them use those powers in their own unique ways to do battle is so fun, and you can tell the animators were having fun creating those action set pieces. They are jaw-dropping to see. I really don't have any major issues with this film right now. I've seen it twice, and in terms of narrative, character, and visuals, it's pretty fantastic. The two things I want to say to wrap up this non-spoiler section are important and need to be stated though. One is a technical flaw that I noticed with the film. So a little background, my brother saw this film before I did, and when he came home from seeing it, he told me that there were serious audio issues with the music and sound effects being much louder than the dialogue. The mixing was just pretty bad at some points. He assumed that it was the theater that he saw it in that I was going to be seeing it in the next day. That night, however, I saw reports that a lot of people were complaining about the audio, and I did definitely experience it on both my viewings. The opening scenes of the film especially were very rough, and it was pretty hard to understand what the characters were saying. Apparently this was widespread enough that right before I recorded this video, they sent out a new version of the film to theaters that had fixed the mixing, which I find kind of funny, almost like it's a patch for a video game. Either way, if you have those audio issues, it may be because your theater didn't get that updated version. One more thing before we move on into spoilers. This film, when it was first advertised, was advertised as a part 1, and they did stick with that. They just dropped the part 1 and redid the title, but it has always been a 2-part film. I went into the theater with that knowledge, so I wasn't bothered, but a lot of people were unaware that this was a part 1 because of the title change and some events that take place toward the ending. So, fair warning, this is a part 1 to a 2-part film. Go in aware of that. To wrap things up, I love this movie. With them releasing an updated version of the film with fixed audio, I now have an excuse to go see it again, and I will definitely be using it. Go see Across the Spider-Verse, please. Alright, this is the spoiler section where I'm just going to throw out some big ol' spoilers for the story. Here we go, I gotta talk about this. First, the two antagonists of the story, the Spot and Miguel O'Hara. When the Spot showed up in the trailers, I was worried that he was going to be played as a joke for the entire film and distract from what the trailers were showing as the real thread of the story, Miguel, and for the Spot's first scenes, it seemed like that was where they were going, and then they kind of did something really clever with this character. He was a scientist that worked at the lab where the collider was from the first film, and inadvertently, Miles created the Spot when the collider was destroyed. That's the first big reveal of the character. The second is actually even more significant and really affects Miles personally. Just as he is responsible for the creation of the Spot was involved in bringing the spider that bit Miles over into this dimension. That spider wasn't meant to bite Miles as far as Miguel O'Hara is concerned. Both of these characters are responsible for the other in some way, and at first, Miles does not take the Spot seriously at all, until the Spot figures out a way to gain more power, and as he does, he becomes this nuclear threat, not just to Miles, but to every single universe. He opens up these portals that allow him to travel to each and every dimension and wreak havoc. As this power grows, the jokes stop, and he becomes something to be feared, not laughed at. What's cool about the Spot is that he highlights this theme of the butterfly effect. Like, the slightest thing can drastically alter the destinies of so many people. Where that's made so clear is that the Spot is the guy Miles hit in the head with a bagel in the first movie. That's the Spot. That guy becomes this. I love it. I love what it adds to this story and what it opens up in terms of questions and debates that people will undoubtedly have in regards to Miguel O'Hara. Miguel sees Miles as an anomaly, something that should never have happened, and because of that, he isn't to be trusted and must be restrained before he can cause damage to the other dimensions by breaking the canon, as he calls it. Miguel discovered the concept of canon events by trying to live a life where his family was alive, by swapping places with another version of himself that died. Because he did this, this dimension was destroyed. Miguel lost his family essentially twice. And because of this, I empathize with him and kind of get where he's coming from, but don't agree with the choices that he makes. In a way, he parallels the Kingpin from the first film. Like, he's someone who wants to have his family back, but goes through that loss again because of his actions. The action that Miles is trying to prevent is the potential death of his father. The death of a police captain that is close to Spider-Man is a canon event that every Spider-Man either has or will experience as far as Miguel is concerned. I root for Miles as he fights off all these spider people because I love his family and don't want them to go through another loss like they did with Aaron, but the entire time I'm wondering if Miguel is right, and that is what makes compelling character conflict. The opposing ideologies that both make sense in their own way is just great writing. Now, I've got to talk about the massive cliffhanger that this movie ends on. Miles uses a device after the chase sequence with all the spider people, intending to return to his dimension and save his father. But the machine actually sends him to the dimension where the spider that bit him is from. Because that spider bit him, there's no Spider-Man in this dimension, and it is a kind of terrifying scene where Miles talks to his mom and slowly realizes that he's not home. His Uncle Aaron is alive here, and even more shocking, there is another version of him that is the Prowler in this world. The mood of these scenes are so dark, the music is like a horror score for a while, and there's subtle visual differences between this world and Miles' original world that makes it feel alien and scary. This is a great plot twist. It's a great ending. I can't wait to see how they resolve this in the next film, especially with how they resolve the arc that Gwen goes through with her father, which, hands down, my favorite scene in the entire movie. The emotional conversation that Gwen has with her dad after everything she goes through in this story is just flawless. The visuals, the voice acting, the dialogue, it hit me just as hard, if not harder, than the first film with Miles' dad talking with him on the other side of the door. It's phenomenal, and it opens up possibilities from this single conversation, because Gwen essentially saves her father because she convinces him to leave the police force, making him no longer captain, which means he's no longer going to die, and that canon event won't take place. There's another solution to the problem that Miguel thinks Miles is going to cause. I'm very excited for how they're going to handle this in the next part. The very last thing that I want to talk about is the fan service that takes place in the lobby with all of the Spider People. It's so cool to see all of these different versions of this character. If you're a bigger fan of the comics than myself or a more casual fan, then you will probably notice so many things in the background that I didn't, and that creates this unique experience for superfans. Again, I'm no Spider Man comic book expert, but even I was hit emotionally by some great fan service when both the Insomniac Games version of the character and the Spectacular Spider Man animated series version appeared. The Spectacular Spider-Man, voiced by Josh Keaton specifically, is probably my favorite portrayal of this character next to Tobey Maguire, and is actually the voice that I hear in my head when I do read some Spider-Man comics. To have his version show up and actually have lines of dialogue trying to reassure Miles of what's going to happen was so cool for me as a fan of that series. What would be even better is if in the next part I get a cameo from the 90s cartoon version that had the best theme song ever done for a Spider-Man show. Anyway, I've talked a lot longer than I thought I would, so I'm gonna end this here. Thank you so much for watching this and listening to me just ramble. I appreciate every one of you. I'm almost at 8,000 subscribers right now, and that is beyond what I ever expected when I started this channel. Thanks for caring about what I have to say for some reason. It really means a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time.